All right, everyone, we will make a start. Thank you. And I have to apologize, the ability to use you can absolutely use the chat and the Q&A function, but it's just me today, so I might not be able to get to your questions in addition to doing the presentation this afternoon. So if you do have any questions that we weren't able to answer today, or if there's anything that you want some more information about, if I can just please ask you to email education@together.org.au. That would be excellent. Thank you, everyone. So we'll make a start. Thanks, everyone, for joining this afternoon. As I said, I know for many of you, this is the end of an already very long day, so I really appreciate you taking the time. We will be recording this session as well, so if you have any questions about, or sorry, if your co-workers have any questions about the webinar this afternoon, of course, they are able to rewatch that, and we'll send it around to members. We know it's difficult to find a good time, particularly for our schools-based members. Sometimes work really well for some groups of workers, but others not so much. So yeah, just appreciate you taking some time out, particularly School Support Staff Recognition Week. Before we go any further, I would of course like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting today. For me, in the South Brisbane office, that is the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander members we might have with us today. So we will try to keep today relatively short, but in terms of the things that we wanted to cover off on today, so of course, School Support Staff Recognition Week, an update around negotiations, and we do have some, hot off the press, literally just a couple of hours ago, updates regarding negotiations, which is very exciting, and also a campaign update about your ED campaign and how things are going. So this week, of course, is School Support Staff Recognition Week for 2022. So hopefully you are being recognised and appreciated in your schools across the state. If you are, for instance, having a morning tea or an afternoon tea, we'd love to hear, or rather love to hear about them, but also love to see any photos that you might have taken of those events as well. We know that Minister Grace and the department are also putting up some profiles of school support staff throughout Recognition Week, just to really highlight the amazing work that you do. That is often, unfortunately unsung when we're talking about schools. So this is an initiative of Together from a number of years ago. So really, please do take the opportunity to take a moment with your fellow school support staff and actually recognise the really important work that you do, and the work that you do. Without that, schools would 100% grind to a halt. So hopefully you are, feeling the love this week and getting some appreciation from your fellow co-workers who we know they often have their own days. So you deserve a full week to cover all of the roles that you have that are in the school community. Now, in terms of where we're at with collective bargaining, so again, this cartoon is probably not the first time that many of you will be seeing this, but a really good opportunity just to pause and understand where we are at to. So essentially, we're between steps 4 and 5 at the moment. We'll give a negotiations update, but of course, we also have our campaign on foot. But for those of you who maybe haven't been part of a bargaining campaign previously, this is a little snapshot of what to expect in a usual bargaining campaign. And we will drill down into what's happening in negotiations and also what's happening and what will potentially be happening in your ED campaign as well. But always a good opportunity to sort of ground ourselves into where we are at and what we have already done as well. Notwithstanding the fact that it has been a good number of months that your campaign and the hard work of members has been underway as well. So in terms of negotiations, and also, a good opportunity to note that your EB expired last week. So the 31st of August was the last day of your previous EB. So we are now in the position where, well, nothing will change in your day-to-day working life. Your conditions don't change just because your EV has expired, but it certainly does, put some more urgency around, particularly trying to get your wage increases passed on in a timely manner, but also, of course, ensuring that we can have full and proper negotiations. So some of the non-wages aspects that form the log of claims that members have fought really hard for to get on the table, that we are actually able to have some really significant negotiations around that and do that in a timely manner as well. So in terms of the negotiations, while we have been meeting weekly for many months, and we've had a range of different delegates from all across the department and all across the state be part of those negotiations, and they've spoken so well to the claims that members have endorsed as part of our log. And they really, really wonderfully explained why exactly these claims are fair and reasonable, but also why they are really, pertinent and why they need to happen now. And also in many ways, why it's in the department's best interest to actually implement some of the changes that we are suggesting. So there's been no, bargaining is an opportunity for employers to also put on the table claims. So sometimes we do see employers seek to take away existing conditions or to modulate them in some way. We haven't seen that as yet. The department is saying that they are, reserving their right to do that. When they, talk about the sorts of things that they're interested in or what their interests are around the bargaining table, they've outlined 5 things. So for the language to be simple and consistent, and also the structure of EVs, particularly given that there are 5 EVs that cover the department, for it to be compatible and facilitative with the wider state industrial framework, of which there are a number of changes going on at the moment, that anything new that comes out of the EV encourages capability uplift, so essentially upskilling, I guess. Also enabling mobility. We've of course had some really great wins around maximising permanency of employment, and so the department is keen to ensure that that is something that can continue on, but of course they have their own interests in making sure that there's some flexibility around that as well. And finally, that acknowledges union engagement, which of course is something that we're very on board with. So, as I said, we have been meeting weekly for a number of months now. The negotiations have been respectful. The single bargaining unit, in terms of the departmental representatives, have certainly been coming to the table to hear what delegates have had to say. But because there has been no bargaining framework approved, those negotiations haven't really been able to go anywhere. So it is frustrating because we've had, dozens of delegates who have sat around the table, who have taken time out from their busy day to come and speak to the issues, many of which, it's not the first time that members have raised it, because this is an iterative process. So working through that and just explaining why, these claims are fair, they are reasonable, and doing so in a really, exceptional way. But the response has been that, that's thank you for coming here today to outline that, but we can't actually engage in any really, nitty-gritty discussions around that, because the department has no instructions as to what is potentially on the table versus what they can't talk about as well. So as recently as yesterday, we have been in contact with members about the frustration around this delay. So while the Department of Education EV expired last Wednesday, so we're a week out from expiry, some of your colleagues in the rest of the public service, their EVs have been expired for a good couple of months. So we have a number of, for instance, your colleagues in Transport and Main Roads, also doctors in the hospital system, their EVs expired at the end of June. So they've still been as much as we have in education, have been turning up to weekly or fortnightly negotiations. It has been a couple of months since their EB has expired, but similarly have been in the same position where the department isn't able to come to the table necessarily because they don't have those central instructions from the state government. So this week, we asked members to put a bit of pressure on the Treasurer to sign off on bargaining frameworks, essentially, so we can actually start to talk about the detail and start to properly negotiate by having both parties, across the table, having done their due diligence and being there to actively engage in those negotiations. So we did have thousands of members who participated in that activity, which is really great. And very excitingly, today we do have some breaking news, I believe, as of this afternoon. We understand that there are frameworks for the EBs who expired on the 30th of June or beforehand. They have been approved frameworks for bargaining. So it's not that we necessarily have, certainly don't have a full offer on the table for these EBs, but the shackles have been, lifted, and we understand that the wages policy, as well as the non-wages aspect for these EBs, the framework for those negotiations have been approved. So we have a number of negotiations that are occurring this week or early next week within those EBs. So hopefully we can get some significant progress around there. Certainly in transport and main roads, the members in particularly in customer service centres have been taking protected industrial action for the past couple of weeks. So that's really good to see that their action has actually made a difference and has finally got the government to the table in terms of proper negotiations. So unfortunately for the Department of Education, we don't have the notice today to say that you also have a bargaining framework for the DOE EB. We anticipate that fairly soon we should have that bargaining framework. There is, I guess, a bit more urgency to those EBs that did expire at the end of June, who a couple months down the track still don't have their framework. So hopefully we are not far off rather getting a framework for the Department of Education. As soon as we do hear more about that, of course, we'll be back in touch with members to talk through what that looks like. I think it's probably fair to say that even with a bargaining framework, because we kind of not start from scratch, but we are really at the beginning stages there, because departments are now actually able to say, we can negotiate around that, or we have this much room for movement, or potentially even we have this many dollars that we can work with you on. So let's get down to it. There's probably still a little bit more of the process to go. Not anticipating that there will be full offers on the table in the next week or so, but it is a really important step for us to be able to actually continue to progress EB negotiations. So well done to the Together members who have been part of seeking that the Treasurer and government centrally do actually put their money where their mouth is and come to the table prepared to negotiate, as our delegates have been across a number of different departments for a good number of months as well. So that's really exciting. And yes, something that has just happened this afternoon. So we are still waiting to hear some of the finer details, but I wanted to let you know, given we had this opportunity to discuss this afternoon. So yeah, great news, and hopefully we'll have more information specifically about the Department of Education soon. So while we've spoken a fair bit about negotiations, I think certainly for our members for whom this is not your first EB, you would appreciate that it's not just about what happens around the negotiating table. So you've got some really excellent delegates, really excellent advocates around that negotiating table, but that's often not where we actually win, particularly some of the really big ticket items. We know that we need to actually make the government, the department understand that this is actually, for whatever issue or whatever claim it is, that it's actually something that our members are not going to, take lying down, that it is something that they feel really strongly about, and they're prepared to do something about it. So this is really, really old hat stuff, I know, for a lot of our members and delegates who might be on the line. But when we look at the, how do we win? What's the formula for that? I think three of the most key parts of that are really having active and engaged members, having delegate and activist networks across the state and across all of the many different roles that you have here in the Department of Education, and also focusing on issues that are really widely and deeply felt. Because if we try to, start a fight about something that members don't care about, it's not going to work, basically. So in terms of having active and engaged members, of course, a really easy way for you to do that, and I think everybody who has joined us here today, you coming on board at the end of your day, that's really great to see. And just talking to your co-work is really important. It's really easy to think like, oh, well, they must be getting all of the emails and they must be keeping up to date as well. But you all know how busy you are, particularly in schools. So if I could, encourage you to have a chat to your co-workers in this School Support Staff Recognition Week and just ask them, are they getting the emails? Are they checking the updates? Are they reading the negotiation updates on the member-only blog? Of course, if they're not yet a union member, having that discussion with them about why it's so important, particularly in a bargaining year, to be part of their union so they can have their say. You have a really strong delegate and activist network across the state. Of course, it can always be stronger, and always looking for people in some of those perhaps smaller, more discrete cohorts of workers, because we know that your issues, while they might be different and there might only be not a huge group of you across the state, they're still really important. So we've seen a number of those get activated over this bargaining period, which is really excellent. But of course, we can always be stronger in that aspect. So if you've been thinking about becoming a delegate or becoming a contact for your workplace, never a better time to do it than in the middle of a bargaining campaign. So please do reach out to your local organiser, your local delegate, or the union office centrally if that's something that you'd be interested in talking a little bit more about, because there's a range of ways that you can be involved. Certainly shouldn't be scared about, becoming more involved. And it's also a really exciting time to do that too. So in terms of next steps for your bargain as well, so we've spoken about negotiations and those will continue. Hopefully we'll have a framework very soon. Those will continue, those will run their course, and your delegates around the table and your advocates around the table will, of course, be putting the best arguments there. But we know that's not always enough to make that happen. So delegates have endorsed having discussions with the United Workers Union about any potential activities that they might be seeking to take to make sure that we are, not working across purposes, and that both of our actions have the most impact if members decide to go down that path. Well, of course, school holidays are coming up, so we'll be using that time to work with our delegates about what that looks like. Hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, we will have a relatively good idea from the department about what's actually on the table, what could form part of an offer. I think, based on recent negotiations, sometimes we really do, need to have the fight about that. And if it's something that members feel strongly about, this is the perfect opportunity to do it. So without preempting what it is that members decide to do, I would really encourage you to, stay on top of your emails from the union office, continue reading the negotiations blog and any other updates that we might send out, because it might come down to a point where we, get an offer, or it might very well be that the department, drags it out and doesn't give you an offer. But there may be the need for members to, take that into their own hands in terms of protected industrial action, which of course is only available to union members. So I know we have, when our organisers are out visiting schools and our delegates are having conversations about what that could look like in terms of work bans or work stoppages or things like that. So please do, keep informed and keep up to date, because it's union members who make the decision about whether or not there is protected industrial action, and if there is protected industrial action, what type of action it is and when to take that action as well. So that is entirely a member decision, of course, with guidance from delegates, but it is, entirely in your hands. And it may be that we need to do quite a quick turnaround potentially in regards to how negotiations end up going. So please do keep engaged. Have a chat to your fellow co-workers about what's important to them, and if they do feel strongly about getting a decent outcome, whether it's on wages or any of the other log of claims items that we have, if they want to make a difference around that, they really need to be a new member to do that. So that is essentially what we wanted to cover today. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time this afternoon. I know it probably is the end of a long day for many of you. So as I said, unfortunately couldn't both monitor the chat as well as do the presentation today, but please do email us at education@together.org.au if you have any questions. And for members, of course, you've got the member-only portal. And if you go to together.org.au/schools, you'll be getting all of the latest updates about education. So thank you again so much for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Please do keep on speaking to your co-workers, keep on staying updated with how things are going, both in the negotiations and the campaign. And if you do have any questions, please reach out to your local organiser, delegate, or to the union office centrally. And no doubt we will be in touch soon. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.